People who were in a coma, what change surprised you when you woke up? My wife was in a medically induced coma for 4 days. She had a reaction to contrast dye and her heart stopped for 20 minutes. For nearly 3 months, she was confabulating about her long dead parents. She would speak about them like they were in the next room. Or she would say her daughter or brother called, but they hadn't. Over and over she thought her mom was alive, then her dad. Drove me crazy having to gently correct her many times per day. She would come up with amazing tales about what people, relatives, friends, neighbors were doing, what they said, truly creative fiction. 3 months later, she began to come back. The confabulation stopped. Now things are reversed. She can remember recent events, but her long-term memories are gone. I don't know what that's like, but it must be awful. She cries sometimes for her lost memories, but overall she is doing very well. I was in a coma for 9 days. When I woke up I was still on a ventilator. When they took me off the ventilator, my body didn't remember to breathe on its own. I literally had to relearn how to breathe. Took me a few days. I had no natural sense for how long or deeply to inhale, how long to hold it, how long to exhale. I had to put all my mental focus towards breathing. It was really weird. Edit. For all the people wondering how I slept, I didn't. For the first couple days. If I dozed off, my blood O2 monitor would start beeping and wake me up. Then a nurse would yell at me from across the ICU to remember to breathe. I couldn't talk because I'd had the tubes down my nose and throat. But I remember one time I woke up, really exhausted, to that damn beeping. So I started focusing on breathing again, but I was really angry about it. My nurse came running over yelling at me to breathe. I glared at her and screamed in my non-existent voice, I am. She must have read my lips and felt the rage because she just put her hands up and said, alright, good job, then walked away. Anyway, shared that because I've never had the opportunity to before. My ability to breathe normally was back within a month or so, and my health is good nowadays, so I wouldn't say it had any permanent effects. Was in a coma for 2 days. Not medically induced. Woke up utterly confused at the time and day. Didn't know if it was morning, evening, what day of the week. Couldn't believe where and what time it was. Was very agitated. Had vague memories of what happened before it all went black, but they were very confusing and erratic ones. Turned on my computer to check the date/time. Realized I'd missed an exam and that a whole 2 days had passed without my knowledge and freaked out about that. Frantically charged my phone to check for messages. My absence mostly went unnoticed and I felt extremely lucky, then relieved, then sad and started bawling uncontrollably. Edit. Should have mentioned, this was a hypoglycemic coma. I didn't just open my eyes and plop. I'm back on my feet and I'm freaking out. My first memory of easing back into consciousness is of me rocking back and forth in a fetal position on the bathroom countertop while eating an apple. Then some time passed by and I later regained consciousness, but this time lying on the floor. I don't recall how I got the apple, or to the countertop, or back to the floor, but as my mind started working again, I was distressed and extremely agitated. My wife was in a coma. 2 weeks medically induced. When she woke she had very wrong memories. They were all based on conversations people had while in the room with her. For example, she thought they flew her to Washington DC for treatment. While she was in a coma, my father-in-law mentioned how he just flew back into town from DC on a work trip. Somehow, she overheard this while out, and her brain interpreted it to mean she flew to DC. Even after we explained to her the reality of where she was, it took days for her to come to terms with reality. A guy I dated for a few weeks in high school was standing at a bus stop when I was driving back to my old hometown to visit my parents. I waved at him, and he just looked bewildered. So, I messaged him on Facebook just to be nice. It turns out that he had no idea who I was cause he'd been in an accident and a nearly half-year coma. He somehow woke up with a Scottish accent and had to relearn to walk. His family finally figured out that the Scottish accent was because his ultra-Scottish grandma was with him a lot as a baby, and I guess that's what his brain latched onto. He's now a happy Ren Fair performer who used to be a very troubled guy headed for military service. I guess he's happier, but it really makes you wonder who he would have become. He also kept asking me if I knew why he wore this specific ring. Unfortunately I didn't. Back in the 90s, my great-grandfather had a stroke. He was in a coma for 3 weeks, and when he woke up, he could not speak English. All he could speak was the Choctaw language. He had learned it when he was a kid because his family lived right near a Choctaw reserve, and he played with a lot of those kids. He spoke it fluently at that time, but forgot it over his life to where he couldn't remember any of it by this time. This went on for around 10 days, and then he woke up from a night's sleep and could suddenly speak only English again, not remembering a word of Choctaw. He was also able to repeat verbatim every conversation that had been held in the room that he was in. My mom was in a induced coma for 3 months. When she woke up she thought the hospital was trying to kill her. She tried to get out of bed and she fell on the floor because she could not walk. She was mostly freaked about how her feet had lost their form. They were humped over from not being used. Every muscle she had to learn again. She couldn't talk well or write at all. She has different handwriting after relearning. She said she hated how perfect her hands looked. Her nails and cuticles were perfect and clean from not being used. I remember trying to brush her hair after she woke up. Almost all of it fell out. She almost died pretty much every day she was in her coma. She had sepsis from a diverticulitis surgery gone wrong. A lot of her hair has grown back and she can walk, but has brain damage that makes her seem very drunk. She is always dizzy, but it's been 5 years now and her recovery has been miraculous. Thank you all so very much for the love. I can't wait to tell her of all the people here are rooting for her. She's going to be so happy. And to whoever gave me my first gold, it's an honor to earn it for my mother, truly. Thank you. It's also going to be good for her to hear how much of you went through similar things and ended up with brain damage. She won't feel so alone. I truly thank each and every one of your comments. Much love to you all. I was in a coma for almost 2 weeks. The things that surprised me was personality change. I went from a meek sweetheart, from my husband, to a total raging bitch. This lasted a couple of weeks while in the hospital. Like if you ever been in a hospital or nursing home, there is always one patient screaming at the top of their lungs. Yeah, that was me. I yelled at everyone nearly, my poor nurses. One nurse actually threatened me because I was just that bad to him. 2. I was surprised how quickly your body deteriorates while bedbound. I went from relatively strong to not being able to sit on the edge of a bed without someone holding me up. I was like a sack of potatoes. Not to mention bed sores. I had no idea they could happen that fast. Medically induced for approximately a week due to sepsis. When I was in, I thought I was a bird with my wings outstretched that was slowly freezing to the ground. When I woke up, I thought I was in Taos, but it looked like Ratton. I was in Albuquerque, in a hospital that I had worked in 4 years. I thought I was 10 years younger. I thought I had gotten into a wreck and my fiance at the time was an abusive ex-boyfriend. I thought my fiance had found me naked on the side of I-25 and had taken to a veterinary hospital. It took another month and a half for me to understand what happened. I was in and out of surgery and died a couple times in that time. Once, they were changing out my wound vac and I looked down and saw inside of me. Then things started making a little more sense. I still can't eat cheeseburgers. A good friend of our family went into a coma for half a year. Finally when he woke up, he was stunned why his wife looked so old. He actually lost the last 15 years of his memory. He knew he had 2 children, but they were babies, and he didn't even know about his 3rd child. And the memory never came back. He skipped from no mobile phones to smartphones, to laptops. Everything was new to him. Being stuck in early 90s, but actually being in the 2000s, there was a lot of change to handle. But learning you missed all your children growing up was the hardest for him. I was in a coma for 9 days. Probably most surprised by how I had to relearn how to pee and swallow. Also, not a change, but I was surprised that if I had never woke up I'd have just never known, if that makes sense. No light, no dreams, just a big nothing that I'd never be aware of if I hadn't woke up. Don't know what I was expecting. I'm not particularly religious or anything, it's just weird. I was in a coma for 3 weeks. From September 2nd to September 26th, 2001, I was driving through Pennsylvania on my way to Ithaca, New York, to meet with the head of marketing for the company I worked with at the time. I'm making this trip on September 2nd, 2001, and I don't exactly remember much of what happened, except what was told to me by EMTs and hospital staff, but the gist of it is, I was hit or forced off the road by a drunk driver trying to cut across 3 lanes to get to an exit. I was in the furthest right lane. Basically, I was in his blind spot at the wrong time. On top of him being drunk as shit, pretty much everyone on here can guess the thing that would happen on September 11th, 2001. It feels like I teleported or traveled through time, because one minute I'm driving, the next I'm broken and bloody, I'm in a hospital bed with a back and neck brace, burns from the gas of my airbags deploying, an IV in my hand and a few other minor injuries. When I woke up I was in an entirely different world from the one I left. Before I went to sleep, the economy was doing alright, I guess. It seemed like America had her shit together for the most part under Bush. Generally things were cool in the world. And then I woke up. Chaos. That is all for now. About 20 years ago, my cousin had a severe head injury from a fall. He was about 20 at the time. I was in a coma for almost 4 weeks. When he woke up, he fairly quickly discovered that his memory was eidetic. He could repeat entire conversations back word for word, and even tell you the date and time you said something. Also, he could memorize images with just a few seconds glance. His memory is still eidetic today. It's annoying as fuck. Whenever he reminds me of something I said in the past, usually something I can't even remember, I suggest that we hit him in the head again. I was in a coma for 4 days. When I woke up everyone was talking about the baby boy I had. I had lost my long-term memory and didn't even remember being pregnant. My son was at the children's hospital in the NICU. I delivered him via C-section at 29 weeks. All this was due to me having Crohn's disease. I found out after I woke up my colon had ruptured during my pregnancy. My husband said I was talking like a child when I first woke up. When I woke I felt super tired, but then the next few days, kinda restless. I remembered one conversation my mom had with a nurse while I was under. After a couple of days I got my long-term memory back and remembered everything up until my second surgery, then nothing until I woke up. My son was my third surgery. My nephew, 14, was in a medically induced coma for over 3 months. During that time, he had lost about 30% of his body weight as his muscles atrophied. His first remark upon seeing himself for the first time was, "Did you forget to feed me?" Which was incredibly hard to hear, since his family had sat crying at his bedside every moment he was unconscious. Little late to the party, but after a suicide attempt which led to an overdose I spent about 2 days in a coma and almost died. While obviously nothing changed in 2 days society-wise, my personality changed heavily, and I don't consider myself the same person as before the coma. I feel like that side of me died, and different parts of my brain took over, creating a new personality in control. My stepdad was in a coma/ICU for about 3 weeks. Woke up and he couldn't find his teeth. We looked for a week, completely forgot where we put them. Then he dropped dead at the bathroom sink in the hospital, out of nowhere. They revived him. Couldn't figure out why he could barely breathe. Then the hospital sat us down and showed us the x-rays with his dentures in his body. They forgot to take them out when they put the tubes in his mouth, blocking his air pipes or whatever. So yeah, we found them though. Thank you for watching. If you enjoyed the video, hit like. If you would like to see more, feel free to subscribe.